Hello and welcome to the daily newspaper analysis. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 10th of January 2018. Coming to the first article, this is an article on the editorial page of the Hindu. It is read as the Iranian crisis is not yet over. The opinion is that the largest public display of discontent since 2009, the current protests signal a new period of uncertainty. Now, coming to the context of this editorial, the context is the recent unrest that is going on in Iran. This is amid a deepening economic, political, and a social crisis in the country. Now, before we discuss the editorial, some background needs to be discussed because these events have been mentioned in the editorial. First and foremost is the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Now, what had happened in the 1979 revolution was that the then prevalent monarchy till 1979, Iran was under the rule of the Pahlavi dynasty, which was a monarchy, and the monarch was known as the Shah. And it was in the 1979 revolution that this dynasty was overthrown and the Shah was exiled, and this resulted in the theocratic republican government in Iran. So this is the background of the 1979 revolution. Coming to another movement that has been mentioned is the 2009 Green Movement. Now, what happened in this movement was that 2009 marked the presidential elections in Iran, and it was in these elections that the president Mohammad Ahmadinejad won vis-a-vis his opponent Hossein Mossadegh. And it was in the aftermath of this election that a large number of people objected to the election results, and they revolted against this election process and called it a rigged one. Also, the symbol of Mr. Hossein Mossadegh was a green colored one, and that is the reason why this movement is known as the Green Movement, because in the aftermath of the presidential results, it was his symbol which became the symbol of the movement as well. So that is the history of these two movements. Coming to the analysis of the editorial, first and foremost is a comparison with the Green Movement. Now, the present unrest in Iran is similar to the Green Movement, rather at a higher level than that was prevalent at the time of the 2009 Green Movement. However, some differences can be drawn. The Green Movement was largely led by an upper middle class, whereas the current unrest in Iran is something that is characterized by the lower and the working classes, especially the dissatisfied youth in rural areas, towns and small cities, whereas the Green Movement was largely restricted to Tehran. So that is one stark difference which shows that the present movement is more mass based, it is more serious, and it is more penetrative. So that is the first analysis. The second is that what are the causes of this unrest? Now, the primary cause of this unrest is an economic one. The citizens have a feeling that the government has been unjust and unequal in managing the Iranian economy. Further, the economic woes have been worsened because of Iran's foreign policy, which has been continuously, interfering in Syrian conflict as well as in the Yemen turmoil. So the citizens have a feeling that it is because of this wrong foreign policy decisions of Iran, which is also impacting the economy. Further, these economic frustrations are largely because this has happened in the aftermath of the election of the current president Hassan Rouhani, who had promised economic reforms within Iran, and this has not been realized, and that is the reason that the youth is getting aggressive towards the establishment, the present government. Also, there's an issue of a generation gap, which is largely due to changing demographics in Iran, which is largely becoming youth oriented now. The population is largely comprising of the youth. Also, it is this youth which is, educated. It is educated. It has university education. It is characterized by urbanization. There is internet penetration in Iran. So all of this has resulted in a change in the thinking of the youth, which is highly modern and secular, and thus the demands out of the government are higher. Not only that, the youth does not have a memory of the 1979 revolution, and so it does not believe in the ideals that the political class in Iran is following, which is of theocracy. So that is another issue, that the newer generation is calling for more secular reforms. So the entire complex scenario is where there is a lack of legitimacy, or there is a crisis of legitimacy regarding the political institution itself in Iran. So that is another major cause for the present unrest. Also, there is a social division within Iran, which is between the rich supporters of the regime and the poor rebels. Now, a stark analysis can be drawn is that these rebels, they do not have any political ideology, nor do they have any political leader. So it is coming out of pure contempt for the government and with no political insinuation. So that is one important point. Also, some analysis can be drawn regarding the recent failure of the Iran nuclear deal, which was brokered under the Obama administration. It was assured that in the aftermath of this deal, a large number of sanctions will be removed from Iran and its economy will pick up. But the ground effects of this has not been realized in Iran, and this is another precipitating factor for the present unrest in Iran. Now, coming to the third issue, which is of finding a solution to this problem. Because the problem is so complex, it has many factors. So definitely this is a long-term problem. It is not something that has been triggered suddenly. It has been festering for long, and definitely the solution will be a long-term one, and a short-term solution to this problem is definitely not a result. Also, coming to the present scenario in Iran, the present scenario is one of political fragmentation in Iran and also an open challenge to the clerical elite in Iran. So there is a wholesale rejection of the entire system, and this can lead to a meltdown of the theocratic ideology in Iran, which is prevalent since 1979. So that is another aspect of this particular unrest. Another thing is that there is a leadership vacuum in this unrest. No political leader or any reformer wants to take up the leadership role here. This is primarily because of a fear in Iran amongst the leadership there that any the imploding of situation can result in a Syria-like condition, which will cause Iran to become a destroyed state without a government. So because of these fears, there is no leadership backing to these protests and this unrest. So that is one issue. Another issue is that of comparison with the Arab Spring, because in the aftermath of the Arab Spring, nothing conclusive has really come up, and there have been various unpredictable outcomes. So it is in this backdrop that Iran unrest is not being welcomed even by the international fraternity as well as within Iran itself. So this is the entire picture related to Iran. Now, coming to the ramifications for India, definitely Iran is of key importance to India, especially because of the Chabahar port that India which is very much in interest of India, which is a alternate route for India to enter Afghanistan. This is more important because the relations with Pakistan and India are at an all-time low. So this is the only route for India to enter Afghanistan, where India has high stakes. That is important. Other important factors are that even for the stability of Afghanistan, which is right now very much vulnerable in the backdrop of a weak government in Afghanistan and also the US forces withdrawing from Afghanistan, it is also in the interest of Afghanistan that Iran remains stable. If this does not happen, then the entire West Asia will be prone to terrorism, and this is not something that is in the interest of India as well. Other smaller issues like the Tapi pipeline and other issues like oil imports from Iran, especially in the backdrop of rising oil prices, these are definitely matters of concern and will have ramifications for India. So definitely a stable Iran is in the interest of India also. So the general opinion is that definitely there is a huge challenge in Iran to curb the economic hardships as well as the political repressions that are happening in Iran, and work towards reforming the economy and creating new jobs and undoing the international isolation which Iran has faced for so long. And as far as the crisis in Iran is concerned, it is definitely something that is not going to come to an end soon, and new developments in this regard will definitely be seen during 2018. So that's about this article. Coming to the next article. Agriculture needs a reform package. The opinion is that only an overhaul resembling the industrial liberalization of 1991 will work in the agriculture sector. Now, what is the context? The context is of a general agricultural distress that has been plaguing the Indian economy for a long time. This has now been even acknowledged by the political leadership of the country, though it had been ignored in the past, but now it is well acknowledged. A number of reasons are there for the agricultural distress, but the prime amongst them is that the incomes of the farmers is something that has not risen in the past few years. A number of factors can be attributed to these low incomes, but one amongst those factors is definitely a flawed government policy. So it is this editorial is largely about the government policies regarding agriculture. So coming to the government policy flaw, the entire policy of government on agriculture is largely consumer oriented rather than the producer, that is the farmer oriented. This is what has been brought about by the author. Now, how is this policy largely consumer oriented? First and foremost, there are restrictions on trade. There are restrictions on price control. Also, there is an income, there is an economic variability for the farmers, which is something that has been a continuing phenomenon for long, and this is not something that has been resolved. Also, the income variability for these farmers has not been fully resolved by the government, despite there have been various rhetoric claims in this regard. So all these trade restrictions, also the issue of agricultural markets not being free, the price instability, all of this clearly reflects that the policy is largely focused upon maintaining the prices of agricultural produce low in the country. So this is largely a consumer oriented policy rather than enhancing the incomes of farmers. So that is one point that has been brought about. Another issue is that of politicization of the minimum support prices. Now, the minimum support prices is largely an economic tool for the benefit of agriculture, but in our country this has largely been politicized, and MSPs are not treated based upon the economic concerns. Rather, it is due for political short interest that MSPs are triggered with. So that is another issue in the country. Now, what should an ideal MSP regime be like? Now, the MSP should be such, it is an ideal scenario has been brought about where the MSP should be such that procurement from farmers should happen when the market is weak and the prices of the produce are low. In such a scenario, the farmers will get a higher remuneration for their crops. Also, the procured crop should be released into the market when the prices are high. This will ensure that the consumers are not harmed, as the releasing of food stocks by the government will help stabilize the markets. So this is an ideal scenario in the MSPs, but this is not something that is ideally happening in the country, because in the Indian scenario there needs to be, for an ideal MSP to be realized, there needs to be a balance between trade controls and stock management. This is something that is weak in the Indian case, and as a result of which the ideal use of MSP is something that is not being realized fully. Now, why is it that what are the problems with the food stocks? There is a poor management of food stocks in the country. Not only qualitative problems are related to food stocks and the problems of wastage. A critical issue that has been related to food stocks has been that during the time when the prices of food crops are high in the market, when there is food inflation in the market, at that point of time the government is not prompt in releasing the procured grains because of a general mindset of the government, which is that the purchasing price that is a price which includes the MSP as well as the transportation cost and the procurement cost that the government has incurred. Collectively, all of this is called the purchasing price. So the mindset is that the price at which the government has to release the food crop should be greater than the purchasing price. So because else it will lead to a loss to the exchequer. So it is this primary issue which results in a poor management of food stocks within this country, and thus the true benefits of MSP are again not being realized. Further, the MSP in the country, despite being a political tool and being criticized for having its low economic benefits, is compared to other countries is a low MSP. Compared to countries like China and other Asian countries, Indian MSPs are very much low, which clearly reflect that they are not efficient in ensuring income stability to the farmers. So this is a major cause of concern. Also, an analysis has been brought about between the Chinese model and the Indian model. The Chinese model of economic reforms included economic reforms and liberalization in the agriculture sector as well. Whereas in the Indian model, the economic reforms of 1991 bypassed agriculture altogether, and this continued to remain a closed sector. Also, in the present times, the government has a mindset that the agriculture sector is not sufficiently productive to gainfully engage the rural youth, and therefore the government is focusing on the manufacturing and the services sector much more than it is focusing on the agricultural sector. So this is something that has been criticized by the author in this editorial, as she has brought about that how in China agriculture sector grew much better and at a much faster pace as compared to India. So definitely a model of economic liberalization is something that is warranted even in the agricultural sector. This is the analysis that has been brought about in this editorial. So the article is entirely important from the paper 3 point of view. Now coming to the next article, question of equality. The context is that the Supreme Court has an opportunity to reconsider its 2013 order which has criminalized gay sex. Now, Section 377 of the IPC is what is under analysis here. The Section 377 came into being in the year 1861 as a part of the IPC. What the provision of Section 377 are that it criminalizes carnal intercourse against the order of nature. Therefore, only heterosexuality is considered as normal. Homosexuality and also heterosexual activities which are not aiding in procreation are banned under Section 377. They are a criminal offense. So that is what is Section 377. Also, you need to understand some more judgments. In the year 2009, the Delhi High Court gave a landmark judgment where it declared Section 377 ultra vires and decriminalized gay sex in the country. So that is the judgment. However, this judgment was petitioned in the Supreme Court for review by the center government, and in 2013 the Supreme Court overturned this 2009 judgment and restored back criminality to the Section 377 within the country. So that is the issue. In the present times, because there has been a recent judgment on privacy as a basic fundamental right, the judgment called for the fact that right to privacy and protection of sexual orientation lie at the core of fundamental rights. So it is in the backdrop of this landmark judgment by the Supreme Court that a review petition has again been filed in the Supreme Court in the Suresh Kumar Kaushal case, and the Supreme Court has decided to again relook into Section 377 by a constitutional bench. Another aspect is that a curative petition of this 2013 judgment is also lying within the Supreme Court. However, a curative petition is one which is largely based upon the idea that natural justice was not followed or the judges were biased. So it is not this curative petition, rather the recent review petition by Suresh Kumar Kaushal that has been filed in the Supreme Court is what is important. Now, the previous cases that were filed in the courts was by the Naz Foundation. This is an NGO which has been fighting for gay rights in the country. So this is the entire background of this issue. Coming to the present issues relating to criminalization of homosexuality within the country. First is that this is considered as a judicial wrong towards the LGBT community, which is the lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender community, largely because it was the 2013 judgment which again criminalized it. So definitely this is being considered as an opportunity to undo the judicial wrong. Another aspect is that in the 2013 judgment, the Supreme Court had called the LGBT community as a minuscule fraction of the population and had said that it is not going to make a stark change in the policy because this was a minuscule fraction affecting very few people. So this was criticized because the crux of any constitutional right is that of protection of the minority. So this was very much criticized on the part of the Supreme Court. So that is why this is again an opportunity to undo this statement of the Supreme Court. Another aspect is that of social morality, which the Supreme Court in this recent judgment on privacy has stated that the social morality changes from age to age. And what may be natural for one may not be natural for another. So social morality is something that is very subjective, and it is on this subjectivity that laws cannot be made. Laws are objective in nature, and especially laws related to basic human rights need to be objective and cannot be based on something as subjective as social morality. So that is one issue. Another issue is that of harassment of the LGBT community at the behest of criminalization of homosexuality under section 377. There have been many cases where law and order enforcement agencies, for example the police, have been harassing the LGBT community. So such cases are continuously coming up. Another aspect that is important to this issue is the health issues. India has a increasing number of sexually transmitted diseases, especially HIV, AIDS. So in case when homosexuality is not legalized in the country, then what happens is that such practices go underground, and the people who are involved in such practices and fall prey to such kind of diseases are scared to report them in the hospitals, and as a result of which the health of the country suffers. So this is one important analysis that needs to be drawn from this particular controversy. Another thing is that of a paternalistic state. Now if the state is going to tell individuals of what is normal and what is not, and what is an ideal and a moral character, then that gives the state a paternalistic character. And this might be valid in the 1860s, but in the present times, where democracy has deepened and modernism is something that is the norm of the society, such things are not acceptable to a country like India, and so such paternalistic tendencies by the state should be eliminated. That is an analysis. Also, there is an issue of rights of transgenders, which was given to them by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court had said that gender identity and sexual orientation is an aspect of privacy and personal freedom and dignity of an individual. So this judgment is also something that can be used to defend the rights of the LGBT community in the section 377. So the opinion is largely in the favor of section 377 across all editorials. So definitely, if an opportunity is provided to you to take a stand on this issue, you must favor a change, because this law is archaic, and even Britain itself has, for that matter, changed its law. So definitely this is important in that respect. And the issue is not merely of privacy, but largely of equality. So that is the opinion that has been given by the author in this article. With this, we'll come to the next article, avoiding roadkill. Now, the context of this article is that recently there has been a tragic death of Baji Rao, who was one of India's breeding tigers from the Boar Reserve in Maharashtra. So that is the context of this article, and this tragic death has happened because of a road accident on a road that was passing through the protected area. So this is the context, and this is the topic of analysis. The opinion is that roads must be kept out of wildlife corridors to protect tiger and other animals. Now, coming to the issues that have been brought about is that first and foremost, building unsuitable roads through wildlife habitat is a terrible cost to the country. Now, you have to understand the economy of this. The fact is that a large amount of the money is being spent on protection of scarce wildlife resource of the country, and tigers being one amongst them. In such a scenario, if tigers are going to be lost because of such carelessness of a road accident, then this is a pittance for the entire country, and this is a major setback to the economic investments for wildlife conservation projects within the country. So that is there. Also, not only the economic costs, the social and the emotional costs related to loss of biodiversity is another aspect altogether. Further, the paradox is that the tigers in India are one amongst the most protected species. The National Tiger Authority is directly under the Prime Minister, and still a death of the tiger has happened due to sheer carelessness. So that is another issue. Also, this reflects a contradiction in the developmental policy of India, which on one hand claims to be sustainable one, but in practice it is not really very sustainable. So that is the issue. Also, though new roads are needed, there needs to be a scientific advice to keep them out of the wildlife corridors, and also this is much more warranted because the protected areas constitute only 4% of the land in India. So when this is such a minuscule amount of land, then definitely extra security in these areas should be ensured by the government. So that is one major issue. Also, such cases amount to flouting of regulation and advisories by prominent bodies like the Convention of Biodiversity under the UN, also the National Board for Wildlife. So these bodies have continuously advocated that roads need not be built in protected areas, but this is something that is not being followed in India. So that is one aspect. Further, some data can be drawn is where it has been given that tigers in at least 26 reserves face destructive impacts of traffic and roads. And these destructive impacts are not merely the killing of tigers, but other impacts also. For example, there is an impact on the breeding and flow of genes between regions. So this is something that is not in the favor of biodiversity, as sustainability of species is itself in question. And this is not merely restricted to tigers. There are many cases of other protected animals like snakes, amphibians, butterflies, leopards, bears, deers, elephants, who are losing their lives to this phenomenon of roads passing through protected areas. Now, some suggestions have been given by the author which are important in this editorial, because what is seeked out of in such conflicting situation between developmental needs and environmental needs is practical solutions. So the solutions offered here are practical. First is that there is a need to modify the existing roads to provide crossings for animals at locations which have been identified. Creating long underpasses for animal movements can be another solution in the present roads. The second opinion is that realigning roads away from all such landscapes is definitely there. That's something that the government should look into. Further, the government should ensure modifications without delay. The government delay is another reason for continuous loss of lives, that the policies are not being implemented on ground. So that is another issue. Also, steps like curbing traffic on existing roads, using speed restraints, banning private vehicular movement at night can be explored. So definitely you cannot take a completely anti-developmental stand in your answers that complete banning of roads should happen. Definitely that probably might not be a feasibility in the present scenario, but definitely some protection and some changes regarding the road infrastructure passing through protected areas needs to be maintained, and this practicality should come in your opinion and in your suggestions. So the opinion is finally that without a determined effort, roadkill will severely diminish India's conservation achievements. So that is the opinion that the author has given in this editorial. So that is the importance of this entire article. It is important from environment point of view. Now, before we end, some piece of information. We have started a UPSC prelims cum mains classes from the 21st of January 2018. We shall be covering all the basics, including the NCRTs, the daily newspaper, prelims test series and mains answer writing. So all interested candidates, please do get in touch with us. These are our contact details and this is our phone number. So with this, we finish today's discussion. I thank you all for watching and I hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you.